watching Shalom TV, celebrating Jewish culture. Funding for Shalom TV has been provided by the following. And by viewers like you.
Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub. On June 15th, 1970, an amazing group of 16 brave Soviet refuseniks, all Jewish except for two, tried to hijack a small plane in Leningrad and fly to freedom in Sweden. The group was betrayed, and all 16 were captured by the KGB at the airport. 11 were put on trial for high treason, a capital offense, and in fact, the refusenik who planned on flying the plane to freedom, a former Soviet military pilot, Mark Dimshitz, and the organizer of the operation, Anat Kuznetsov, were both sentenced to death by firing squad. Anat Kuznetsov's wife, Sylvia Zalmanson from Riga, was also one of the would-be hijackers, and she was the only woman on trial. And along with her fellow refuseniks, she received a significant prison sentence. She received 10 years in prison in a Soviet labor camp. Sylvia thought she would never see her husband again. However, after an enormous international protest, both death sentences were commuted to 15 years of hard labor. Then in 1974, Sylvia was part of a prisoner exchange with the United States and immediately made Aliyah, and in Israel continued to fight for the freedom of all political prisoners in the Soviet Union. And 5 years later, in 1979, Kuznetsov and Dimshitz were also traded by the Soviet Union for two Soviet spies who'd been arrested in New Jersey. And Anat Kuznetsov was finally free to fulfill a dream to join his wife Sylvia in Israel. Within a year, the couple were the proud parents of a beautiful baby girl whom they named Anat Kuznetsov-Zalmanson. And I'm both privileged and pleased to introduce you now to Anat, who is joining us here on L'Chaim on Shalom TV. Anat, it is wonderful having you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
By the way, actually, Anat has become an accomplished filmmaker in Israel and is the director of a film that tells the story of her mother and father's heroic struggle against Soviet repression, entitled at the moment Next Year in Jerusalem. And I want to show you a brief piece about that film.
אם לא היו שוללים מאיתנו את הזכות לצאת, לצאת מרוסיה, היינו פשוט נוסעים לישראל בלי רצון לחטוף מטוס או דברים אחרים.
Any case they will arrest you. Okay, you receive not 15 years but 10 for nothing. It's better to continue and hope maybe it will be big scandal.
In Leningrad, 11 Russians, most of them Jewish, are being tried on charges of trying to hijack a plane out of the Soviet Union last June. Today, the prosecution demanded the two of them, including the pilot, be executed by shooting.
כשאני שמעתי שהוא קיבל פסק דין מוות, אז אני ניגשתי אליו ונשקתי אותו, ולא ידעתי אם אני אראה אותו עוד.
Alone against all this mighty state, it's really desperate situation. And after they sentenced us to death, that Jews of the Soviet Union wasn't afraid. They began the demonstration and so on and so on.
Outside the Lenin Library, this human rights demonstration in central Moscow at lunchtime was exceptional.
From New York to Paris, from the White House to the Elysee Palace.
אל תאמינו אם מי שיאמר לכם שאין תקווה. גם אתם תהיו כאן, יחד איתנו.
Thousands gathered in Tel Aviv City Hall Square to express their solidarity with those sentenced in Leningrad. Prime Minister Golda Meir, her voice sometimes breaking with emotion, predicted that the day would come when the Iron Curtain would be brought down by the Jewish spirit.
מלאה תקווה גם ברגעי ייאוש האיומים. לעולם לא התייאשנו.
Anat, first of all, again, I welcome you to New York, to Shalom TV, to L'chaim. And, you know, for me, it's an enormous kick to be able to sit with you. And first of all, kol tuv v'hatzlacha, wonderful. You've done some wonderful things already, and you're so young, and you're a filmmaker. In the biography I read about you, you have done many music videos that play on the equivalent of America's MTV in Israel. But I want to know a little bit more about you, and then we'll talk about the story that you're trying to chronicle, your father and mother's amazing story. You grow up in Israel, a Sabra, and I asked you before we went on camera, do you speak Russian? You said no. And you explained why, but I'd love you to explain why again. You grew up, where literally in Israel do you grow up?
I grew up in Gan Yavne. It's a small town next to Ashdod. And I didn't speak Russian because no one else spoke Russian around me. I mean, except from my mother, and she never tried to teach me too much. So I know a few words, I understand, but I cannot speak Russian, which is a shame.
The point you made, which I found so fascinating, was that at the time that you were in school as a child, it was before Operation Exodus. There had not been, you know, this enormous influx of what will ultimately be 1 million Russian Jews from the former Soviet Union. You came before that, in essence. So there was not a large Russian-speaking community in Israel as you were growing up, correct?
Correct, and I didn't know anyone who speaks Russian when I was growing up, except for my family.
What was your own self-identity? And I mean that because I do not know the extent to which your mother and father, when they were growing up in the Soviet Union, whether they felt, to what extent they felt Jewish. What did Jewish mean to them? And many of the refuseniks were politically motivated to leave a repressive society in which they as Jews were limited. But it wasn't because they had a rich Jewish background themselves. Tell me about your mother and father.
Well, actually, my mother, she did have a rich Jewish background. She grew up in a traditional Jewish family. And I think in Riga, they had more connection to Judaism since it was not belonged to the USSR for so long. So they celebrated all the holidays, and every year on the Passover Seder, they would say next year in Jerusalem, and then there would be a whole speech by my grandfather saying, if they come now, I will go, even if I can only bring the shirt that I'm wearing. And so they always dreamt about going to Israel. They always listened to Israeli radio, even though it was not allowed, and they always dreamed about Israel. So my mother and her brothers, who were also on the plane and the trial, they always dreamed about Israel, and they always knew they were Jewish, and this identity was very strong. My father, on the other hand, his father died when he was 1, and he grew up in his grandmother, and he wasn't He was Jewish, but the identity of being Jewish became stronger, I think, after he met my mother. So when he was first in prison, before this operation, because he had an anti-Soviet newspaper called Phoenix, and so he was in prison for being anti-Soviet, a dissident. And then he got out of prison, he went to Latvia, and then he joined the group. And then the second time he was in prison was as a Jew. And then he said later on that the second time was easier for him because he felt his purpose was somehow more like a higher purpose than just being anti-Soviet.
That's a lovely story.
Yeah.
So when you grow up now in Israel, and Bob, we should say, your mother and father don't stay married.
Yeah.
Did you have contact with him as you were a child growing up?
Yes, I did. Although he did live in Germany for 6 years, but I would go to visit him once a year. And both my parents are very good friends, and they appreciate each other a lot. And I'm an only child, and they always say they only want children from each other, so that's nice. They respect each other. And so, yeah, I've been in touch with both of my parents, of course.
But he does not live in Israel now.
He lives in Israel.
Where does he live now?
He lives near to Jerusalem in Motza Elite.
Very lovely. So you do get to see him when...
I see him, yeah, of course. I see him, we talk, and he's living in Israel since 1990. The minute he could come, the only reason he left is because he needed to work on his career. And then when he could come, he came. This is his home. He always says that.
As you grew up in Israeli, was the Jewish dimension of your life important to you? You know, you have such an interesting, you come from such an interesting two parents and background, and now you're in Israel. You do not have a Russian-based community around you. How does your own identity grow?
Being Jewish as an Israeli is normal, and if you're not Jewish, you are the strange one. So I think this is, first of all, that's why Israelis always feel so confident in their own skin. I never felt Russian. Also, I don't think my mother is really Russian. I mean, Latvia is not really that Russian. So I felt Israeli, I felt normal. But however, I think I'm always felt very emotional. Even if I hear Hatikva or anything, even as a younger girl, I always felt like this is, I would get emotional about it. So I don't know if it's me or it's because of my parents, but anyway, I think I can appreciate freedom, the fact that we are free and our country and how important that is. So.
Do you have some form of military service?
Actually, I don't.
Why?
Well, I support the army, but I don't think it fits to everybody. And when I was 18, I wanted to study filmmaking, and I didn't see myself go to the army and just sit as a secretary somewhere. And so I just didn't want to go to the army. And also, there was nothing going on when I was that age, and I felt like I wasn't needed, which is interesting because actually here in New York, now when we had mini war in Gaza, I was part of the people who organized some of the demonstrations. So suddenly I became political, which is here, because in Israel I didn't feel needed again. So yeah, I wish I could. I wish I would been. Now I think I should have gone to the army. But when I was 18, I was a little rebel, and I couldn't. I just thought I want to study filmmaking. I don't want to be in the army and people tell me what to do and.
So you were a little rebel, were you?
Well, yeah, I was. I have my family blood, so but I took it to the opposite way.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what draws you to filmmaking?
I always knew I wanted to make film. Actually, my mom says my father is a writer and my mom, she's a painter. So I tell a story in paintings, right? It's a combination. I got a video camera when I was 12 for my uncle, and I couldn't stop using it. I was creating plays and with my friends and making them wake up at 6 a.m. to do commercials and music videos and stuff like that. And so I realized also I didn't care too much about how I look like in the camera. I cared about how they look like. So I just realized I wanted to be a director. That's something I knew since I was 12.
And you've done these music videos, yes?
Yeah.
Where did you study?
I studied in London Film School. Before that, I studied in Sapir College in Israel, but then after that in London Film School, which I think shaped me more as a filmmaker.
Talk about that. What was the London experience like for you?
Well, that was pretty great. I loved it because it's the first film school in the world, and I don't know right now what's going on. I finished 11 years ago. But then the word video was forbidden, only on film, 60mm 35, and the end of the screenings, the end of the term screenings were like today's reality show, like they had teachers saying what they think in front of the audience and people crying, but I got good reviews.
Good.
Because I saw people cry and I said, oh no, that's not going to happen to me. I'm going to be prepared. So. I learned a lot. I learned the language of filmmaking because it was a real film school, and yeah, it was. I think it really.
And this is what you do now in Israel.
Yes, in Israel I did mostly music videos and promotional videos, but I always knew I wanted to make a film. However, it was too hard because you can't make a film and do other jobs. You have to do it full time, so you have to be brave. And say, okay, I'm going to just go all the way and just do it. So that's what I did in the past year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then you decide not only to do a film, ambitious as that is, you decided to do a film about your parents' story, which again, the working title is Next Year in Jerusalem. Why?
There are a lot of films about this subject.
And when you say the subject, you mean?
Refuseniks, but there is no film that talks just about the Leningrad trial, just about the story from beginning to end. Not a film that is accurately historically anyway. And I always felt like that's something that needs to be done, and I think that I need to do it. I think this is my job, my mission in life, because I understand not only the story, but the characters, the people, what motivate them. And also, I think I'm probably the only one who can interview my father right now. He's very tired of interviews.
Did your mother, and for that matter, your mother and father, talk to you a lot about the entire incident?
No, because they talk about it all the time. This is boring for them. I make them because I ask them questions, but they didn't talk to me a lot about it.
Growing up, this was not something you heard all the time?
Not at all. Just from people, just from outsiders, from teachers. Teachers, because they were in the demonstrations for my parents, so they were very excited to see the daughter. So when I was 6-year-old, it was like in the classroom, can you stand up and tell the story of your parents? And I didn't know how to tell it. I was only 6. So.
You mentioned at some point in some of the things I've read about you that at one point in time, the entire Refusnik movement was something that was talked about a great deal in Israel, and that you seem to say that is no longer true. Did I understand you correctly?
You understand, yeah.
So why is it that this incredible story of modern Jewish exodus and survival and transcendence, and it really started after the Six-Day War of 1967. Why do you think in Israel the story isn't being told? And I should say to you, Anat, it's not being told to young American Jews here, but it seems to me there would be a greater reason, since it resulted in this incredible immigration of Jews from the former Soviet Union, and because it is a story that in many ways fits the model of what the State of Israel is all about. Why do you think it is that story is not being told in the State of Israel today?
Well, I think people have a tendency to appreciate things after they're gone. At the moment, those people are still alive and here, so it's not that interesting. Like the Holocaust, people became aware of what really happened only in the past few decades. I mean, when it first happened, people didn't talk about it too much. So although it was a big deal in the 70s and the 80s as well, and I was growing up, I remember they taught it in school still. But then it became, for some reason, it became a non-important story enough, I guess, to tell in history. But I think I'm looking at this story and I'm thinking, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, we have to make this film now. We have to let these people sit in front of the camera and tell their story, because otherwise we miss the chance. And I think this story is also very inspiring for everybody, but especially for young people who feel like they cannot make a difference. This is 16 people who were 25-year-old and less, who made a huge difference. They changed the world as we know it.
Yes, we should make sure everybody understands this trial was so internationally celebrated, meaning that it drew the attention of the world, that in many ways it was almost as if it was the kickstarter of the Save Soviet Jewry movement. And it's not like nobody knew about it beforehand, but that event in Leningrad was in many ways a watershed in the entire Soviet Jewry movement. And that's why you feel it's also an important story to tell in and of itself.
It was true, but also I would like to add and say that I've met a few times with Glenn Richter, who is the head of the student struggle. And Soviet Jewry, I know it started in 64, 65. However, they did not know that people are not allowed to leave the USSR. They thought Jews are not allowed to be Jews. Even the slogan was, let them live with an I, or let them leave. But they didn't know they're not allowed to leave. And this trial made it clear that people are not allowed to leave, but that they want to leave. And that is why this trial was so important.
Isabel, you mentioned Glenn Richter, who was really one of the unsung heroes. There are people who do know who Glenn Richter is. And I began doing this program, L'chaim, on radio in 1979. And Glenn Richter was one of the first individuals who was really a colleague of mine working on that program. And he sensitized many of us to the Soviet Jewry movement. And I was with him on many rallies, and then with Avi Weiss. Do you know Avi Weiss?
Yes.
Who was one of the pioneers on the American Jewish scene, who argued that it should become part of the establishment's agenda. The Jewish establishment should care. And there were many Jews outside the Soviet Union, outside of America as well. There was Izzy Liebler doing the same thing in Australia. And there were many wonderful, wonderful Jews, but they were individual lone voices. And Glenn Richter was one of those who was really just did fabulous work for Natan Sharansky, was then Anatoly Sharansky, and for his wife, Avital. And, you know, it was a privilege for me to know these people who were so inspiring. So I'm glad you mentioned the name Glenn Richter, and who continues to do wonderful work, but he's just not well known. He's not a household name on the American Jewish scene, and he should be.
I'm going to interview him as well, of course. I mean, this story is not only the people who are behind the Iron Curtain. This is a story of the people outside the Iron Curtain who were fighting for them. This is a story about the whole Jewish nation, how Jewish people come together and they brought down the USSR.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yes.
You know, I recently had the pleasure and privilege again of sitting with Yosef Mendelevich, who was in your father's group, one of the people who tried to hijack that plane. And he also has become a major figure and a major spokesperson on the entire Soviet scene, and now he is a major figure in the state of Israel. And it's interesting, I read some of the accounts, and I was surprised his name wasn't mentioned because, again, so many of the people who were with your mother and father at the time were courageous pioneers. And so I assume he will also be in your film, yes?
Of course, everybody in the group will be in the film, except from the one who are not with us, but they will be mentioned, obviously. And also, this is, as I said, this is a film about not only the group, but also the people in the West that were fighting for them.
Is there any detail of the story that you hear and you know for a fact there's a mistake in the story? Or do people basically get it right now?
people don't get it right yet. It is impossible to get it right if you don't research it properly. But I don't get too upset about it, just a little bit. This is always I say, okay, so this is why I have to make this film. But you can't blame people, because if a reporter from television is making a story, a 10-minute story about it, and they only just now learned about the story, okay, of course they cannot understand a lot of details of the story. Like, for example, it's lately an article they were showing, they thought that people were actually dressing like bride and grooms for the
because it was supposed to be a wedding party that was taking this plane.
Yes, but they only said they're on the way there, but it's okay. It's like a small day. It's fine. I mean, it's not in a film.
They weren't dressed like a wedding?
No.
Yeah. Talk to me about Dimshitz, who was the pilot.
Yes.
As far as you know, was he enthusiastic about this mission, or was he in some way reluctant and sort of dragged into it?
Oh, it was, I'm not sure if it was his idea or Hillel Butman, because they both say it was their ideas. Maybe, it was both of them ideas. It can happen. Like, sometimes two people can think about the same idea. Dimshitz was very enthusiastic about it, especially everybody. After the Six-Day War, they all said the same thing. After the Six-Day War, they saw small Israel surrounded by big Arab countries, and they won, and they thought, we can do it too. It inspired them. Dimshitz, he knew he can do it. He really thought, I think he was one of the few who thought they can actually succeed. The group is divided in that sense. Like, my father, he absolutely knew they're not going to succeed, because he packed the prisoner clothes and a book of how to be a good prisoner. And my mother packed clothes for freedom, just because she was hoping for a miracle, but she didn't really believe so.
But they realized it would take a miracle?
They told everyone who joined them that 50% that they will be caught before they're going to the airplane, and 50% that they will be shot in the air. So they didn't even say they will succeed.
Why did they want to do it then?
Again, different people for different reasons. My mother, she just wanted to do anything just to do something, because she didn't want to stay in Russia anymore. She wants to be in Israel, and she felt she has to do something. My mother is a very impulsive person, and she believed as a Jew that a miracle has to happen. My father, he felt that the world should hear about it, and if they will get caught in the airport, then maybe the world will hear about it. And he counted actually on liberal Jews, American liberal Jews, that would do something, because that time he knew that they were already fighting for Vietnam and for freedom in general. So why not fight for their brothers in Russia?
So for each of them, for slightly different reasons, this was a protest movement more than a literal escape to freedom.
I don't think they were hoping for freedom, but they knew it's not going to happen. But also they thought maybe if they'll be in prison after 4 or 5 years, maybe they will be released. But
and by the way, they were right.
They were right, yeah. It took them a while to realize they were right. But at first, before the trial, they thought they did a huge mistake, because before the trial, it wasn't that famous, and actually the Russian had made life more difficult for the Jewish underground. So they thought we made a huge mistake, because now we are like the Jews terrorists who tried to hijack a plane, which I have to say, I don't like the word hijacking. It was stealing a plane, because they didn't plan to harm anyone or take anyone by force. But only after the trial, it became famous, and then things started to change.
Why were they captured?
Why? Why were they captured?
In some way, somebody found out they were going to do this.
Oh, okay. The first plan was to steal a 200-seat plane and to take 200 people to the wedding. And that the first plan was also, but then my father, he says, we couldn't find 200 crazy people. We could only find 16. So you tell 200 people, of course it will be found out. It wasn't a huge secret. It was hard to keep secret in that country. And
so it was not a matter of someone betraying this group. Basically, if the Soviet KGB wanted to find out about it, they were going to find out about it, and they were really waiting for this group at the airport.
We actually have reason to believe, and this is we're going to look at more in the film, that KGB created this flight again for them, because this route was already not existing at that time, and they recreated it and somehow informed Dimshit. So it was actually, they helped the KGB, because the Russian, they thought if they also wanted to catch them in the airport, because they thought they're going to show the world, oh, Jews are terrorists trying to hijack a plane. So they both had the same mission, strategy, but we were right.
How interesting.
Yes.
Okay. Now, was this your father's plan? Was he literally one of the organizers?
No, actually, it was Dimshis and Hillel Butman, who was at the end not part of the group plan, and they told my mother, and she told her brothers and her husband. But my father, since he was an experienced prisoner, and he's a natural-born leader, so he people trust him, they would follow him. And he organized it. He would go from Riga to Leningrad to talk to Dimshits and organize it and think about it. But originally, no, it wasn't his idea.
Now, as your mother tells this to you much later, you're born a year after they're together, back in Israel, so it's years and years, and you grow up, and finally you begin to learn the story more and more. As you say, first from other people, finally from them. Did they ever say to you that they were frightened?
Yes, they were afraid. They were, but also they had a strong feeling that they are doing something that they should do, and they are fighting for something that is right, and that made it a bit easier. Mm-hmm. They were very strong all the time.
What do you think was the hardest thing for them, both before this event and then as they lived through it?
I don't think that the day of the attempt stealing was hard. I think that it's scary, but still you're already inside the adrenaline and action, and you can do it. I think what was hard was the time that they were in prison, especially my mother, because she was in a cell for 6 months because she was hitting an anti-Semitic woman.
Really?
Yes. And yeah, my mom, she's a fighter. This woman, she called another woman, not my mother, because everybody was afraid of my mother, of course. So she called another woman Jid, like dirty Jew. My mother heard it, and she felt she had to protect Israel, because those old people, they feel like they want to show those anti-Semitic people that they prefer that they call you like that they hate you as a Jew, but not feel sorry for you. So she hit her, and then she got 6 months in a cell, and she could only wear one cotton dress, and so to keep warm, she had to put newspaper inside the dress and jump all the time. So I think that was pretty hard, 6 months. Also, she was the only one in prison. She had no friends, only all her peers, so that was also hard.
To the extent to which you want to talk about it, did it scar your mother?
I would say, I'm sure it did. But I think the first scar was when she was 7-year-old, and she was the only Jewish girl in school, and the kids was hitting her because she was Jewish, and the teachers were watching and didn't do anything. So I think that was the first scar for her. She realized she's surrounded by enemies, and as a 7-year-old, realizing it's hard as a child. And then she decided to not be a victim. It did scar her, but my mother, she's a very strong woman, and now she leads a happy life, and she's very warm and nice, and She's always kind, so I think that's making her strong.
Is that thrilling for you? I mean, you're seeing a story about your parents. This is your mother and father. Is it thrilling for you, or is it sort of you now take it for granted?
I am the more I grow up, the more I understand the story better, because I can suddenly see myself in their shoes, because I'm a lot like my parents, both of them. So like when I was 25, my mother told me, you know, when I was your age, I was in prison. It's like a family joke because the whole family was in prison, so I didn't follow their footsteps.
Does your mother love the state of Israel?
My mother loves Israel. That's her home. She says she came to Israel and immediately, the first day she came there, it was already hers. And she never felt belong in Latvia, even though it was generation of a family. But in Israel, one day, and this is it.
Does your father love Israel?
My father loves Israel. He says Israel annoys him a lot, but this is home. This is family. You get mad at your family, but this is home.
Okay, and you? Do you love Israel?
I love Israel, and I think it's a really good place to grow up as a child as well. Yeah, I love Israel.
So I asked you this again. I asked you this before. I want to ask it one more time just to make sure that there's nothing else you want to add. You want to tell the story because you're afraid that the story will be lost and not enough people in Israel and really around the world now know your parents' story, correct?
This story will be forgotten if I don't make this film. I know that for sure.
Okay. And is the film in your mind about the specific event, meaning 16 people tried to take a plane, they didn't make it, 11 were put on trial, they ultimately, all of them basically who were put on trial, spent many years, regardless of how many, in some form of Soviet prison, labor camp, whatever. Your parents do survive. First your mother comes to Israel, then your father comes to Israel, and it is a story of survival. But is it, in your mind, are you telling that particular story, the story of the attempted, you said a better word, stealing of a plane, not a hijacking of a plane in Leningrad, or do you feel you're telling a larger story, the story of the Soviet Jewish refusenik, prisoner of Zion story, the arc of that story? What are you hoping to tell?
I'm telling of how it starts, how the Soviet Jewry movement started. Well, I know it started a little bit before, but this is the kickstart that make it grow and make it strong, and this is what inspired the Soviet Jews to keep on fighting, and this is what brought the first Aliyah to Israel in many years, because in the 1970s there were 163,000 Jews made Aliyah from Russia. And if you see there, I'll show you a graph. If you see a graph of Aliyah, so you see like a huge growing up on the 70s, then going down back on the 80s and back in the 90s up. So this is a larger story, but it's a political story, it's a historical story, but it's also a personal story. Not because it's personal for me, because it's my family. I'm saying it's personal because I also think it's interesting to learn about how people felt and how people dealt with difficulties. Of course, they are heroes and they're strong, but they were also afraid, and this is also a very difficult time for them. And they were also sick, so I think that stuff is interesting too. And on the other hand, their brothers are in America and in Israel and in Canada and in England. They were fighting for them, and this is how they changed the world. This is how.
Bowie, in Israel, are there film organizations, especially ones that are connected to a governmental agency? If there are they encouraging you or discouraging you?
When I tried to do it in Israel 3 years ago, it was impossible to raise funds to do it. Maybe now things have changed, but when I tried, they weren't very interested in doing something that happened in the past. They wanted me to do something that's happening now, and they wanted me to make the film about me. To be honest, I don't see why I have to be about me. I didn't do anything. I was just born. And I think about 100 years from now, I think people, like, I'm so excited to watch archives from the 70s and the 60s, how people would want to see what I'm doing now. I came here and actually hoping that in New York, since first of all, America is the land that the dreams come true. And second of all, in New York, there is lots of organization. New York was very big on demonstration in the 70s. And I was hoping I could meet more people here that can see the same vision as I do. Mm-hmm. Now I'm going back to Israel and trying to raise more money there. Maybe this time I will be more successful. I think I will. Mm-hmm. I think sometime it was just a bad timing. Maybe 3 years ago, it wasn't in fashion. Now it's fashionable again. So,
you know, we just celebrated the 25th anniversary of that incredible March on Washington, where 250,000 people came to stand in the shadow of the Capitol building and to say to President Reagan, you must help bring down the Soviet Union, you must bring down the Iron Curtain, you must bring down the Berlin Wall, and you must free Soviet Jews. And I don't know if there's a single event that one can point to and say, historically, that made the difference, but it was part of the process. And as a result, there is an awakened interest in what you're doing at this point in time. So maybe this is the right time for you to really find the funding to make this film.
Yeah.
I asked you, by the way, if your parents talked to you about how hard it was for them during the event, and then you said they talked to you about how hard it was to be in prison. Did they ever talk to you about what it was like for first your mother to come to America? Did she come to America or right to Israel?
Israel.
So what it was like for your mother to go to Israel and for your father to come to America, to be joined by your mother and to walk off a plane, and here he is, a free Jew, first in America, and then the both of them fly back to Israel. And again, they deplane, and they're in the Jewish state. They have fulfilled a dream. Did they ever talk to you about that dimension of this story?
My mother, she had a dream a day before she was released. She didn't know she's going to be released.
Really?
They both didn't know. It was like they just let them go. They didn't say anything. So she had a dream that she was released, and then that it's really noisy outside, and all the cars are falling at her, and sky and everything is scary. And she thought, if they tell me I'm free, I'm not going anywhere. And then the next day, they told her, Zalmanson, come follow us. And then they told her, you're free. So, well, first of all, she said, I'm not going until I see my husband. But after she was with him for 3 days, and then she came to Israel, and she was very shocked. She still felt like she's a prisoner. She still felt like she's being followed. She was very anxious all the time, and very emotional, and also felt guilty. Her husband, her brothers, her friends are still in prison, and she's free. She wanted to suffer like they do, so she went on hunger strike for 16 days in front of the UN, and she was waiting for them. When my father was free, he was also very, shocked, because not only he was in prison for 9 years, and before that for 7 years, but those people, they were in prison all of their lives because this country was a huge prison. So it takes a while to get used to freedom. You cannot just be immediately happy.
And Anat, what does happen to your mother's siblings?
They were the younger one. He was released in 1978, which was his full sentence, 8 years, and he immediately came to Israel. And her brother Wolf, the older brother, he was released in 1979 along with my father. Most of them were released in 1979, except from 3, the 2 non-Jewish one, Morzhenko and Fyodorov, which were punished for joining the Jews. So they had the worst destiny because they were in prison for 15 years. And Yosef Mendelevich, who you mentioned before, he was released in 1981.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Are they all still alive?
Well, Morzhenko is not alive, and also Mary Hanoch, she wasn't on trial, but she was part of the group. But most of them are alive, and I'll interview all of them.
Incidentally, a silly question for you.
Sure.
There were 16 in this initial group that were going to steal this plane. The plane didn't have 16 seats. It had 12 seats. What was the thought there?
That is maybe they thought they would sit on each other.
I see.
Well, don't forget you have the pilot. And
13.
Okay, so and then you have the pilot and someone next to him. So
14.
Yeah. Okay.
Just two people had to run
exactly.
alongside.
And there were two teenagers, so they were probably skinny.
The reason I ask, I wonder if it comes back to what you said before. They never thought they were getting on that plane. It may have been that the number of seats on the plane was really irrelevant, because they understood, as you said, this was a symbol. But I always said to myself, just interesting. And then we should also make sure the audience understands. There were 16 people, but only 11 were put on trial. Explain why.
Well, the other 5 were all women. There was one of them were pregnant, 2 were teenagers. And all the men, when they were caught, they said that all the women, including my mother, Silva Zalmanson, they said they just followed us. They didn't know what's going on. They thought we're going to a wedding. And they believed, all of them. Well, I don't know if they believed, but my mother, she was considered a leader of the group. And since she was the one who convinced most of them to join, and the KGB knew that, so she couldn't have been released. She was actually the first on trial to go on the stand. But I think the KGB, they didn't want to put on trial a pregnant woman and a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old, and so just my mother. And that's what made her the symbol of this struggle.
And, you know, she's been shown in a beautiful picture that ran in Haaretz, where she is by one of the paintings that she has done. She paints now.
Yes.
Is she a good painter?
She's a very good painter. She paints night and day and nonstop and very passionate.
She sounds like an extraordinary human being. I mean, the reality is, you understand, you come from 2 extraordinary parents, and you're doing something extraordinary yourself. And in that way, by the way, you are the legacy of your mother and your father, and you're making a very important contribution now to the Jewish world. I want to ask you one question about today. We talked about how you grew up, and you were not surrounded by other Jews from the former Soviet Union. And now the Jewish community from former Soviet Union is a major factor in Israeli life and in Israeli politics. As you look at it now, and I'm asking you now as an observer, how is the Russian immigrant community that made Aliyah as a result of being freed from, Soviet tyranny, how are the Soviet Olim doing now?
I think they're doing very well. Some yes, some no. It depends on the person. It depends on luck sometimes. But it does raise another questions which I like to actually respond. That I've, since started to make this film, I've heard a few comments of people saying, oh, we fought for Soviet Jews, not for them to come to America, but for them to come to Israel. And I want to say, I think your fighting is for freedom. So you cannot decide for a person where he should live. That's the whole point of this fight. And Israel is not like a ghetto where you're supposed to want to live there or you don't. So this bothers me. A lot of people say, although the people in this group are actually, most of them live in Israel, but that's not the point. The point was about freedom and not about, I think it's a hypocrite to say that. And yeah.
That argument was raging in the early 1990s when Operation Exodus began, and there was a real question that the Jewish community faced across America. Should we, American Jews, be encouraging those who were free all to go to Israel? Or if there were Jews who wanted to come from the former Soviet Union to America, should they be welcomed here? And I made exactly your argument, that there was nothing Jewish about telling some Jew who had lived in freedom, lived in tyranny, now was being given freedom, and now we will tell them where they have to live.
And you're Jewish too.
Yes, yes. By the way, every American Jew is choosing to live here, and we're telling them no, they can't come here. So I remember that. It's funny. I hadn't thought about it, Anat, for years and years and years, and I remember making that argument so passionately, and I was so angry anytime I heard a Jew argue they had to go to Israel, and I would say to them, if they have to go to Israel, why aren't you going to Israel? So I'm very, very glad you said that, and I'm proud of you. What I've also heard is that the younger generation now, like many generations, are sort of distancing themselves from the Russian cultural baggage, and that's a pejorative word, from the cultural Russian background that many of their parents brought. There were many Russian Jews, and I find that an oxymoron. There were many Jews from the former Soviet Union who did not want to live there for all kinds of reasons. Not only because they wanted to be more Jewish, but they didn't feel a part of the country. They didn't feel part of the society, and they were in some way imprisoned, even mentally in some way. And they wanted a better life for themselves and for their children. But there were many of them who loved Russian culture. They loved the Russian language. And they came to Israel and they brought that with them. I am told that many of their children now do not want to embrace that part of their parents' past. And I want to know the extent to which, here you are a young person yourself, to what extent do you find that to be true?
I think what I feel I brought from my Russian culture, sort of Russian. Again, my parents are from Latvia, so they resist the Russian culture. But still, just the fact that my mom took me to ballets and opera since I was 3, like very, very young. So I observed, like I watched Carmen, and I saw Hitchcock's Bird movie when I was 5, and so I didn't just watch a kids movie. And I was told I have to read Master and Margarita by Bulgakov. This is a very famous Russian book, but for Russians, if you don't read it, then you are not an intelligent person. So this is the Russian part of me. However, I don't feel Russian at all. I am completely Israeli. And I have a few Russian friends, I guess, but they're also Israeli, so we don't think about it. I mean, this is Israel. Like, parents come from all over the world, and the kids become a mix.
Yes.
Yeah.
You really are lovely and wonderful to spend some time with us. I really hope that you raise the money to do your film. I wish you kol tuv hatzlacha in all the work you do. I would not be surprised if one time you come to America, because you are a famous filmmaker, and I only ask one thing, that you still will meet with me, even when you're very famous and you're here to get an Oscar, and after the Oscars and your way back to Israel, you'll stop here at this table. Do you promise?
Promise.
Okay. I wish you all the best. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
My conversation with Anat Kuznetsov-Zalmanson, who is the director of her own film that she's in the process of making, about her parents' incredible story as they tried to take a plane to freedom from Leningrad. It's called right now Next Year in Jerusalem, and we will watch to see that film's progress, and I hope at some point I'll be able to show it to you here on Shalom TV. As always, I invite you to be in touch with me with any thoughts or comments you may have to the things Anat had to say. Please email me, write me, post on our Facebook wall, or tweet me. I look forward to hearing from you. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. L'chaim, my friends, to life.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the Shalom TV website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM. To GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive on DVD with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.
L'chaim is a presentation of Jewish Education in Media.